Alternate service agreements. Look at in-house versus outsourcing. If you have a strong support team, consider sending them to class. And look at third-party service providers as well. Sometimes a one-stop shopping for all of your servicing all the equipment might be easier. You have only a single point of contact. Or sometimes even better provide your performance. If you are selecting, think about a full warranty, total coverage. In many cases, a time and materials is a better deal, particularly if your system is very reliable. When you're on the time and materials and it doesn't go down for a year, that basically means that you haven't spent a penny on service. And then you want to bundle the training and negotiate, because the cost of training is relatively little for the vendors. Ask the vendor what does it take to get additional people trained on your system. Send them to school or get them in-house training. And then specify and look at all the different boundaries. Who is taking care of what? If in the past maybe the PACS administrator took care of maybe computer support, maybe more efficient to have now IT taking care of that. And see where biomed can take a role, not only maybe necessarily for installing a modality, but also making sure that the images are properly archived. So think about all the different boundaries. Is the RIS support only responsible for the radiology information system, but also for the work list being properly provided? Think about the boundaries and specify them again and see where you can make some changes. With regard to the service agreements, make sure you include every detail, like who is calibrating the monitors, and little details such as who's vacuuming the intake and the dust filters of the computers. If nobody does that on a regular basis, depending on the amount of dust you have, at a certain point in time you will get a lot of failures. Cleaning the cassette, is that something that is done often enough? Do you need that more often, and who's doing that? For example, simple thing as plate jams. Who's clearing those? Can we train the technologist or chief technologist to take care of that instead of having to call every time a support person, PACS administrator, or even in many cases the vendor, which is pretty expensive. Another thing you might want to think about is definitely cloud or the VNAI, vendor neutral archiving or cloud. More than 50% of the institutions are considering vendor neutral archiving. There's no uniform agreed definition of the vendor neutral archiving. Some people say, I have a vendor neutral archive, and basically the only thing they provide is a DICOM archive. So you need to make sure that you agree upon your requirements of the vendor neutral archive and look at your level of integration. And there's a resource, there's a very good white paper about vendor neutral archiving and other documentation available. So making sure that you address it. And if you think about a vendor neutral archive, specify what kind of VNAI, what is the level. Then you want to weigh the cost and requirements, again the strategic importance. So how much is it going to cost to do a VNAI? How much is it going to cost doing the cloud? And do I want to keep them in-house? Do I want to store them in the cloud or not? And then you want to develop a roadmap. Talk to the different departments in your institution, whether it's cardiology, endoscopy, dentistry. Ask them when they expect to go digital, and if it's within the next 5 years, they really should fit into an overall roadmap and see how we can integrate it together in the vendor neutral archive. So you might want to work with an institution-wide task group instead of being on an island. A somewhat related issue topic will be, when you think about the cloud, is it going to be your own cloud that is maybe managed by your IDN or by a group of hospitals, or do you want to outsource it to a commercial vendor? And so do you want to archive it to the cloud, and is it archiving done internally or externally only done for backup, or is it for everything, let's say after 3 months, or is it only done for disaster recovery? So think about what you want to outsource for backup, disaster recovery, high availability, or everything. So you trade off the capital cost for the operation cost, because ASPs, application service providers and storage service providers typically bill by the click, instead of having to lay out the capital, to provide the overall system. Now, it's not all sunshine and always nice, because you have to think about the risk as well. If you outsource something, there's always a risk with the providers, of course. They might potentially go out of business, or they might actually experience downtime. Even the largest and the biggest organizations, so if you see with Amazon and Sony, have experienced some downtime. And in that case, if your provider is down, you don't have images. So think a little bit about the potential risk as well, and talk with your storage service provider vendor how they take care of it. So, and how does it fit in with your IDN, RHIO, and the national healthcare strategy? If you are considering in your integrated delivery network to centralize storage, and some of the very good examples of that is in Canada, where they centralize storage based on provinces, which is similar to the states in the United States, then it fits in the strategic strategy of the whole province and the whole healthcare delivery system there. And then sometimes it might actually solve an internal skill set limitation. If you don't have a strong IT department, you might be better off outsourcing this whole area. Now, a risk analysis is an important thing to do. You really want to look at the different bottlenecks. Is it bottlenecks for physicians, for radiologists, IT, service, and think about what are the potential bottlenecks, and also look at what are the security and privacy risks. What is the risk that a hacker can get into the system? What is the risk that somebody might break into your computer room? And then also evaluate the audit trails. How accessible are your audit trails? Audit trails are currently required, so that means that every access by a physician for a certain record has to be registered. But how easy are those to print out? How easy are those to collect? And do they provide enough information? And I'm sure you've had probably occurrences where somebody asked for audit trails, and was it easy to get them? And do they audit trails, are they generated using standards, or is it just all proprietary? So with regard to the risk analysis, also think about the backups. Who is making backups? Where are we making backups? Can they be done easier? What about disaster recovery and redundancy? How many copies do you have? Do you have maybe two systems that are mirrored but are both currently located in the basements that are prone to flooding? So do you want to move one of the mirrored systems to another location? So think about a new strategy and determine the amount of money the enterprise is willing to spend to high availability. The system goes down. Are they willing to spend enough money to say it's never going to be down than 1 minute because I have an automatic backup or an automatic standby system available that is always loaded with the same data? So implement some patient safety rules and checks, and establish really QA steps and plans. Have somebody look at the quality of your system and the quality of the performance and the image quality as well. Acceptance testing, very important. Make an acceptance test part of the contract. So when you have a contract that says the system will be accepted according to this attachment, and these are the detailed requirements that reflect requirements from the RFP. And also tie the acceptance to payment and penalties potentially if they do not meet certain requirements. So if you have an acceptance plan that you received from a vendor, make sure that you modify it or review it carefully to meet your specific requirements and your workflow. In many cases, it's actually preferable to have a consultant or at least an independent party perform the acceptance test instead of having it done by the vendor itself. You want to create in your acceptance test plan detailed scenarios, not only like admit a patient and perform a test, but also include all the exception scenarios. Like if a patient comes in and we need to merge that patient record with another record that is already existing. If you need to append the reports, if you need to delete certain images, if you need to do an update of a certain record. And test whether those updates all go for all the different systems and do not necessarily only update the database but also the archive and also the RIS and also the report. And so go through the whole scenario and look at all the different systems that are touched by those changes, updates and modifications. And then you might want to cover all modalities. When you do a testing, make sure you, for example, place an order for all the different specialties, all the different modalities and all the different departments. In addition, you want to anticipate future standards upgrades. There will be new DICOM extensions because there will be new modalities coming out. Every year you go to the different trade shows and you see something you have not seen before, and totally new modality extensions, new technology, new detectors. And so the standards are constantly being changed and upgraded to facilitate things such as fundus imaging and ophthalmology, for example, or digital pathology and and maybe in the future some infrared imaging or whatever it is. So we want to have new services that are specified as part of the DICOM protocol, and definitely new templates for structured reports, because many measurements are currently covered that are done at the ultrasound units, but there are a lot of specialized measurements that still are in the process of being defined, and you really want to make sure that it is facilitated in your system. New 807 extensions as well, new versions. There's a lot of new versions coming out with regard to the document exchange standards. IHE, indicating the healthcare enterprise, also creates new scenarios for new specialties, and also exchange standards for exchanging patient information. It's called PACS, and also do patient data query, PDQ. So when you have a patient that comes in and the patient has seen by another institution, you might need to find out what is the patient identifier that is used in that other institution, so you can then do the necessary query for the documentation. So the PACS PDQ will provide you that, and then the interchange of the actual documents will then be provided by the XDS standards. So XDS for documents exchange and XDSI for image exchange, and the various documents, for example, summary reports, immunization records, and many others are all covered by the called the CDA standard. So you want to also require a certain period for support after a certain release date by the standards committee. So one of the clauses you might want to think of putting in your contract or in your RFP says that the system will facilitate any new upgrades that are coming out within at least 3 years, and sometimes maybe even sooner. There are actually examples of changes in the standard that are actually going to be required or highly recommended by federal agencies, such as dose reporting. Dose reporting can now be done by new exchange standards using DICOM structured reports, which is relatively recently defined. This is something that has to be implemented very rapidly, for example, to exchange the dose information of all the CT scanners, because otherwise the alternative will be to have it done either manually or in a proprietary way. So supporting these new standards by the different vendors is of critical importance. So in summary, when you think about replacing your RIS PACS system, really do due diligence and apply the lessons learned. So do a better job this time and re-engineer. Now you know more about how a PACS system works anyway. You're now familiar with the PACS system. So take a new re-engineering effort. Think about the workflow, how you can change it, and review all the procedures. Not only the workflow that typically addresses only the how this is being used day in, day out, but also all the procedures that cover the downtimes, the backups, and you need to rewrite the instructions anyway, or the restriction part of the procedure. For example, if you have a procedure today about burning a CD, I'm sure that's going to change if you change your vendor, because there might be a different menu choice or different options. You want to perform a risk analysis for security and backups and availability, and look how that will be impacted by a new system and how you can improve on that. So the bottom line is you want to reinforce the strengths. What you have, you want to improve, and you want to eliminate some of the weaknesses, so you end up with an even better system. After you've done it, you can relax and have fun and enjoy, like I do myself as well. Enjoy, and thank you for your attention.